Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to the concession stand here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and this is the review of the new action thriller, The Equalizer 3, which stars Denzel Washington once again, reprising his role of Robert McCall, and directed by Antoine Fuqua once again. This is the, I think, fourth collaboration between these two actor and director. Their first collaboration coming in the Academy Award winning film Training Day, and these three Equalizer films. And this is a weird thing because Denzel Washington, prior to the Equalizer franchise, has never done sequels to nothing. He hasn't done a part 2, let alone a part 3 to any property that he has been a part of. And this go around, this character, in some shape, form, or fashion, has resonated with Denzel Washington. Not to mention that he's killing it, no pun intended. He is killing the role as Robert McCall. If you are old enough to remember the old Equalizer television show from the 1980s, not the new updated one with Queen Latifah. I'm talking about the one from the 80s with Edward Woodard playing Robert McCall. That was a show that, I don't know what it was, but I loved that show back in the day. I think either my dad or my mom was watching that show. I can't remember. I think it was my mom, oddly enough, who was watching that show. I think because it came on like either right before or right after Murder, She Wrote. But that's neither here nor there. We're talking about The Equalizer 3, the film that stars Denzel Washington. And this go around, he reteamed. Speaking of reteaming with his director from the previous 2 Equalizer films and Training Day, he reteams with an actress that he co-starred with, about 15, 20 years ago? I forgot how long it's been. But Dakota Fanning, those two starred in Man on Fire from a few years back. And she was a little bitty girl back then. And now she's a grown woman. And it was good to see them on screen again. This time, this film takes us out of the world of Boston, I believe, where the first 2 films were set. We are in Italy or Sicily or somewhere around there. This is the international version of Equalizer. And man, let me tell you something. I love this movie. I thought I had a lot of fun with this. And I've been debating ever since I walked out from watching it. Is this the best one of the trilogy? It's close. It's close. With some more time, I think I'll be prepared to say it. And so I'll go ahead and just get that ball rolling now. This was the best of the series. This was a well-made film. I mean, from the acting, the cinematography, the action, it worked. Everything worked. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful film. Let's start off with my favorite part of this movie, and that was the cinematography by Robert Richardson. And he is the cinematographer on this film. This is a beautiful, beautiful movie. I mean, one of the takeaways, one of the main characters in this movie was Italy or Sicily. I don't know exactly where they were. I didn't care, but wherever it was, I wanted to go there. What a beautiful, beautiful place. I mean, it was shot so beautifully. Just to highlight the atmosphere, the scope, the scale of where Robert McCall is. And it became another character. It became the character of the film. And oh my God, I fell in love. I want to visit so bad now. This was beautifully shot. Antoine Fuqua, who I am a huge fan of his work. I don't think there's an Antoine Fuqua film that I didn't like. Now, did some were some better than the others? Yeah. Were there some that weren't up to super standards? Yeah, sure, but they were enjoyable. As I mentioned, Training Day. I think his first film was The Replacement Killers with Chow Yun Fat. Also, Bait with Jamie Foxx. That was probably the lower tier of his films, but it was good. It was a fun movie. Tears of the Sun with Bruce Willis. Awesome movie. Uh, the Equalizer films, like as I mentioned. Training Day, as I mentioned. Just last year, Emancipation with Will Smith. Uh, Great movie. If it wasn't for the stigma surrounding Will Smith, I think that film could have really made a push in the Academy Award scene, but unfortunately it fell short. But he has made some awesome, awesome movies, and this is this is one of them. I I really enjoyed his direction here. Awesome job setting up the story. He took his time with the supporting cast. The locals in this town or village where Oliver McCall was set up in, and you got everybody's story, and you got behind these people, and it was done well. It was paced well. The actors. I mean, what can I say about Denzel Washington? I mean, that would shock you. The only thing that would shock you about a Denzel Washington performance if it was bad, and that's borderline impossible. It's impossible for Denzel to have a bad performance in anything he's in. And add this to the list. He was amazing as this character. It really felt like he found a groove with the Oliver McCall character, even though he's played this character twice in the past. It was he added a little extra to this character, but still grounded in the past two performances that he gave in part one and part two. And so it's just the man is a genius. He's the greatest actor of our generation. There's nothing more I can say about it. Dakota Fanning was amazing as the this CIA agent, and to get that little twist at the end with her character was awesome. It made sense. The supporting characters that I mentioned earlier all did a great job. These Italian actors and actresses, I mean, phenomenal. And this is with a language barrier. You they are full blooded Italians here, and you know you still felt the emotion. You felt the excitement and dread and fear and love and every emotion you could think of. You felt it through their performances, and you understood why Denzel Washington's character fell in love with the people in this town and wanted to help them. This Equalizer was the bloodiest, most violent of all the Equalizers. And you know that in the first 5 minutes of this movie. I mean, the first 5 minutes of this movie probably had more blood and gore than the first two combined. This was bloody. It kind of surprised me, this is somebody who's desensitized to all that. I was like, oh my God, this is some gory stuff, man. But it just showed you how violent of a character Robert McCall is, and how the lengths he would go to uh, you know reach his objective. And man, you talking about bloody. You talking about violent in this movie. He was an animal, man. The story itself, yes, it was formulaic. It's a typical action film. It's nothing different that you would find in the first two films. Oliver McCall grows a relationship with somebody. That somebody gets tied up in something that he steps in and rectifies. That's that's the formula for all three of these films. And but it was done with a different kind of a twist this go around, because the film starts off in non-spoiler, of course. It starts off with him uh, on this quote unquote mission, and he ends up getting wounded in this mission, and he has to kind of grow roots a little bit in this town to get patched up by the local doctor and whatnot. And you know as he recovers in this town, he falls in love with the people in that town. He falls in love with the town, and he doesn't want to leave. And so he has to rid this town of its infestation. And I all for it to be connected in a way. It was all done right. Yes, it was formulated, but it had a twist to it, and it worked. It worked for me. It honestly worked. I do have some negatives. This wasn't a perfect film. I do have some negatives. As I said, the story was kind of formulaic. It didn't reinvent the wheel. It didn't, change action films for a new generation. But whatever. The villains, the villains weren't as threatening as I was led to believe from the trailers and who you think he's going up against. It was kind of, I don't know. I didn't too much care for the villains, and they were kind of stupid, in parts, because they set them up like they were truly a threat. They really had me freaked out at the beginning, like the stuff they were doing to these people. It was like, oh my God, these people are vicious. But as the movie went along and they ran across, they effed around and found out with Robert McCall, they got kind of stupid. And I was like, I wanted to be more of a vulnerable foe for Denzel Washington. And it really didn't. That didn't connect. And the climax of the film it wasn't really satisfying. It didn't have that pizzazz that you was hoping for. But I mean, don't get me wrong, it was cool. It was cool and all, but it just didn't have the payoff. I think it should have been more brutal, if you ask me. It just didn't have that feel. The first two films, when Oliver McCall ridded the world of his adversary, it was brutal the way he did it, and it was like sending a message to everybody else. But this one here, it just didn't have that pop. And so that's my biggest flaw, was the villains here. And that's a big part of the film. And so it does take a big chunk out of this movie. But despite all that, which is my only flaw, I still enjoyed this movie. This was still a fun movie. Now, Denzel Washington is up there in age. He's in his 60s. So I wasn't expecting John Wick from Denzel Washington. You know what I'm saying? And they played that pretty cool. It wasn't him doing these acrobatic kung fu fighting style of action. They really did a good job of playing within his age, I guess you could say. They had him act at his own age, but he wasn't old, like old and decrepit type. But he it was basic. It was basic. I'll say that much. But I'm not saying that as a knock. I'm saying that as, man, it was a good job, a good route to take there. And so, to sum up the Equalizer 3, I'll say this: fun time, probably the best in the series. I strongly believe that, even though the villains weren't as threatening as a foe, it was still a really good, violent, bloody, good time. And I give The Equalizer 3, starring Denzel Washington, currently in theaters, a letter grade of a B. I think it's a really good, surprisingly good film. And I'm happy that it did real good its opening weekend at the box office. It did really good. Shockingly good, to be honest with you, but it deserved it. It honestly deserved it. Great job from Denzel Washington, Antoine Fuqua, and everybody involved with the making of The Equalizer 3. Will there be a fourth one? I hope not. I think it's time to pump the brakes. We're good. We're good. Three is enough. Three is enough. Let's move on to something else, Denzel. I loved you in this role, but it's time to move on. Anyways, I would like to know, have you checked out The Equalizer 3 and what did you think of it? Or have you not checked it out yet and you're planning on it? I highly recommend it. You can email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can look me up on all social media platforms. Just look up the KB Radio Network. Also, don't forget about on YouTube, everybody. Subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel on YouTube and like this video if you don't mind. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to the concession stand here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this review of The Equalizer 3. Want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love one another. And until we speak again, you all be blessed.